Hello and welcome to today's orcharhino webinar. I wish you good morning, good evening, wherever you are. So my name is Jan Bundesmann. I'm in Munich, southern Germany, so it's going towards the evening right now here. And I will guide you through today's orcharhino webinar. So together with me, there will be Jonas Trüstedt. He will be following the chat and answer questions if you have any. So feel free to ask questions either in the chat or there's an extra questions and answer sections here in Zoom. You can ask them at any time. And then either Jonas will answer promptly or he will repeat the questions eventually to me. Today's topic of this webinar is compliance policies with OpenSCAP and orcharhino. You will get some words about what OpenSCAP is, and I will give you a live demonstration on how to use OpenSCAP in orcharhino. But before I will quickly explain what orcharhino does in general and what we at ATEX do. So I already told you my name. I'm Jan Bundesmann, I'm a consultant with ATEX. We care about data center automation. We want to automate everything. The key components of your data center are our preliminary focus. So deploying, configuring hosts, servers, and caring for the software that is available on those servers. So the release and patch management. But not only with this real infrastructure components, but also we care for the modern aspects of your data center management. We care for cloud native technologies all around Docker and Kubernetes. So all in context of data center automation, of course, configuration management with Puppet, Ansible, SaltStack as well. And in the center of our effort, we put the orcharhino because this is the tool which already combines a lot of those functions. So why are we so focused on automation? There are a lot of things that automation makes easier. There's some like the buzzword aspect. So you can speed up your deployments, you can be faster, can faster release new software, for instance, manage your data center at a higher frequency, let's say. But of course, it also increases your stability. So everything that you have automated should be automated in a way that it works. And it should be like be spread into your whole data center. Like in the beginning, you had no control about which was done by which sysadmin on which server. Automation can help you in that sense. Also because you can achieve reproducibility basically only through automation. Eventually, you also need to orchestrate services, which means you have a lot of services. You might have several hundreds or thousands of servers. At a certain point, you need to orchestrate which service is running where. This is also a subtask of automation. And eventually, you all probably dream of something where your users have something like a self-service portal. So you can just provide the infrastructure and you have some helping tools that do the hard work for you. And we hope that the orcharhino is such a thing. It can help in a lot of aspects. Basically, you can use it to orchestrate your operating system. So that's the top left corner. You can use it to talk to your hypervisors. That's the bottom left corner, the bottom right corner, and to address the configuration management. And we as a company are basically dealing with different aspects of the software. So we are selling it, but we are also, of course, engineering it or doing developing work. We are doing consulting all around this and offering trainings and also offering support. So what does the orcharhino do? It has three main key functions, I would call them. The first key function is configuration management, because this is the point where it historically came from. So you can use it to manage your configuration management system. So a bit like in a loop. So you have it as a front end for configuration management tools. But of course, you need to have servers where you can apply your configuration to. So orcharhino also cares for the server deployment, and it also cares for the versioning of the software that is available already, for the provisioning of the software to your hosts. I want to have a quick, deeper look into these three topics. And we want to start with the deployment. The base idea is you have to distinguish if you want to deploy bare metal servers or virtual servers. Both is possible. And let's start with a bare metal machine. So classical server can be deployed either through some image, the discovery image, which is a specific image which you can burn to a CD or copy to a USB stick, and you boot your server from that stick. There is information encoded where it can find the orcharhino, and then it fetches further information on how to install the actual operating system. If it's a Linux, then it fetches, for instance, a kickstart file if it's a CentOS, or a Red Hat, or a preseed file if it's a Debian or Ubuntu. So going on with the bare metal servers, you can also use a network or boot disk-based method. In both cases, eventually we'll also end up with the connecting to the orcharhino, but before it's a bit different. So in a network-based deployment, a host starts, asks the DHCP server where it can get the information for the installation of your operating system. And when it gets that, it starts the kernel, for instance, and then fetches those installation files. With the boot disk, it's basically similar to the discovery-based installation, but it's really like a boot image which is specific for your host, so it already carries some information. These methods are also available for virtual machines, where it's even a bit easier because you can more easily control the network the virtual machines are living in. But the idea is the same. For virtual machines, we have a further method which is only available there. You can clone already existing templates. So you have basically already running virtual machine, and then in the second step, again, it queries the orcharhino for some further information to customize this server. And then after a couple of minutes, usually, you should have a readily installed server, either bare metal or virtual machine. Regarding virtual machines, there is several instances where we can deploy to. Most often we encounter VMware clusters, hosts. It's getting more and more often that we also encounter Proxmox infrastructure. So again, a hypervisor. It's also possible to deploy directly to the cloud. We can also deploy to KVM and everything that just uses the libvirt API. And so that's the most important hypervisors. You can also have several of them. So you can have Proxmox and VMware in parallel, for instance, just as an example. Okay, so now we have an installed server. What happens next? the server wants to have repositories for its software. This can also be done through the orcharhino. So the orcharhino can mirror repositories for Linux. So we have here the logos of the major enterprise distributions. We have, of course, CentOS and Red Hat, because those were like already built in from the beginning. Oracle is quite similar to those, so it's also quite straightforward. For SUSE, for the SUSE Linux Enterprise server, you need to have some access to their repositories, which is handled through a plugin which we provide. But then you can also sync their repositories, and of course, Ubuntu and Debian repositories are available as well. You can have them all on your orcharhino synchronized. And out of your synchronized repositories, you can then create something which is called content view. So the synced repositories are available or are stored on your orcharhino, and to make them visible to hosts, you have some abstraction layer, which is called the content view, but it's not also to make it visible, but it's also meant to version the repositories. So a content view is a snapshot of a repository at a certain point in time. Why is this important? You want to have a control over the software versions. So in terms of stability of production readiness, you might want to control if a certain library is in this or that version. So you want to keep it stable. And on the other hand, you want to keep the system secure. This might sound like a contradiction, and that's where another concept comes in, which is called the errata. So an erratum is a set of information based around a vulnerability or a security issue. It describes which packages for which operating system are concerned or are affected from this vulnerability, and which other packages would, package versions would remedy this vulnerability. The concept of errata originally comes from Red Hat. It is nowadays implemented in Oracle as well. For Ubuntu and Debian, there is nothing that the distributors themselves provide. So that's something we as ATIX provide. You can synchronize the errata information in addition to your repositories. And then the idea is, if you have these errata information on the orcharhino, at the same time, the orcharhino knows which packages are currently installed on your host, and it can calculate if some of these updates is necessary to remedy this security issue that you might have there. And then you can just patch this single package or this set of packages inside your content view to fix the security problem. So you can keep all the packages at a certain level or a certain version, and only upgrading those that need to be upgraded for security reasons. That is a complex construct, but it really helps to solve this trade-off problem between productivity and security. Okay, but if you want to or have to control which packages or which software is installed and configured, you have another component of the orcharhino, another key function, which is the configuration management. So the orcharhino serves as a front end for 3 configuration management systems: Puppet, SaltStack, and Ansible. In theory, there's also a plugin for Chef, but this is something we have not tested at ATIX yet. So this is only a theoretical possibility. And I also have a picture here of OpenSCAP, because this is also kind of a part of configuration management. And beyond these very sophisticated configuration management tools like Puppet, SaltStack, and Ansible. There's also, let's say, more basic ways of configuring. So during the installation, you already provide some rendered templates. So this is the first point where you can kind of individualize your hosts. Then those three configuration management tools, they are working during the lifetime of the host. And then you can just open SSH connections from the Orcharhino to the host and send commands directly there. They work slightly differently, those three tools. So Ansible is following a more like a push approach. So it opens a connection to the host actively, while both Puppet and Salt, they have an agent running on the managed host, which queries the Orcharhino regularly. And all those three tools can be used for a lot of things, and also for installing OpenSCAP, which will be the topic of the demo later. And OpenSCAP is a compliance reporting tool, which also then runs regularly and sends compliance reports back to the Orcharhino. So what is the Orcharhino now? We've seen that, of course, it is a piece of software. The key components are Foreman and Catalog, which are two open source projects. And of course, the configuration management tool that you desire, but it's a bit more than just this piece of software. So we have our engineering and testing department, which means we package the software in a way or in a version that we tested before. So our clients will get a definitely working version of this combination of different tools. We also provide the errata for CentOS, Ubuntu, and Debian. So those information is not provided from the distributors themselves. We provide software or repositories rather to connect hosts to the Orcharhino, which also we call it the clients. So there's a client for SUSE, Red Hat, Oracle, CentOS, Ubuntu, Debian for the different versions. These are needed so that the host can talk to the Orcharhino and, for instance, send the package status, so the list of packages and versions that are installed. Of course, our customers get a support if they encounter some problems with their Orcharhino, and they can open, of course, bug tickets, which then will be handed over to our engineering team. And we have a rather large consulting team around Orcharhino. And from this consulting team, we, of course, offer also trainings. And this whole aggregate now is what I would call Orcharhino. So it's not just the software, it's everything that really makes it enterprise ready. So that were some words about ATIX and Orcharhino. If you have some questions at this point, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I would go on with a live demonstration of OpenSCAP and compliance management with Orcharhino. So I see no questions. Then I would just switch to the browser. Just give me a second. Okay, so you should see my browser. This is like the web-facing side of the Orcharhino. So you can talk to the Orcharhino from different angles, but for the demonstration, the web interface, of course, the simplest one. This is the view of all the hosts that are managed through this Orcharhino installation, which of course is some kind of a showcase list as well. So you can see all the different operating systems that can be managed through orcharhino. So there is Windows as well, but for Windows, like, there is not all the options, so we cannot do the package management through orcharhino for Windows. But other functions like deploying and configuration management work for all the listed operating systems. Everything concerning host deployment can be found here under hosts. So for instance, there's the create hosts link, which is also available here at the top right. There is all the information about provisioning. So for which architecture we want to install, which operating system from which installation medium, or how those templates look on detail. And there's also the section compliance, but I will just skip this for the moment because we will have a more thorough look later. Everything concerning configuration management is under this point configure. So you can see, for instance, the Puppet classes, Ansible rows, or salt states that are available in combination with the corresponding variables or parameters. So this can be set here. And you see everything concerning the content management. So this first sections, first menu points here deal with the synchronization of the repositories, how to get them. For instance, for SUSE or Red Hat, you need to somehow put your credentials somewhere. And lifecycle is basically the section where you control how to make it available to your hosts. And on the content type, you can have a closer look at the types of packets or the entries or the contents of those repositories. So you could, for example, list all the packages that are present on the orcharhino at the moment. Okay, but today we want to have a look at the compliance policy management with OpenSCAP. Some introductory words about OpenSCAP. OpenSCAP is a tool to automatically scan for security compliance. The tool then, is a tool that runs locally on your hosts. It fetches some definition of this compliance policy from the orcharhino, checks on your host if it fulfills all those rules, and sends the report back to the orcharhino. I think it's not too old, like has been built around 2010. The actual definitions can be uploaded to the orcharhino under SCAP contents, and there is several sources where you can get these contents. OpenSCAP has their own collections. Then there is some other collections from US federal departments. Some content is also provided from operating system distributors. These SCAP content files are XML files, which you can then, or also must somehow tailor to your needs. This can be done with external tools. So this is not something you can directly do within the orcharhino. There's a tool called the SCAP Workbench. But eventually you have some set of rules which you can then check for on your hosts. I don't want to go too much into the theory. I'm more the user, let's say, of OpenSCAP. And I just want to show you how this would look like. So we take this first host, which is called CentOS7demo.atx. If I click on the host, I always see the general overview of the status. I see, for example, Have there been some events in the previous days? How long did the configuration management need for its tasks? But the important block is this thing here, where you have all essential information at one glance. And the important thing is this upper part. First line says the overall status of our system is not correct, so we have an error. The overall status always points or shows the worst status of the ones in the lines below. So here we have the compliance line, it's incompliant. So this already would make the overall status red. It is installed, there is no configuration changes, remote execution work, but there is also security errata installable. So those two things make my overall status red. We do not care for the security errata for today, but we want to have a look at the compliance. And to see the exact details about this incompliant status, we have to go to compliance, this button here. And then we end up with an overview of the compliance report. Eventually it will load. Okay, so what do we see here? This is the report for the policy demo telnet. So this is a policy which we created for this demonstration here. The report says that 50% of the tasks passed and 50% of them failed. We also see how they evolve over time. We see that yesterday there was a small peak where 2 of them failed and none of them passed. So what happened there? Well, that's when I tried out a bit for this for the preparation of this webinar here. Okay, but I mean, this is just showing that something is not correct, and we know which policy has been used for this check. Let's see what happens in detail. So if you click on the name of this policy, you see the details. Basically, this is a list of the checks that have been performed, and again, the metrics of our run. We see that we have 2 tests, one passed, one failed. That's the 50-50 distribution. And we also see roughly what those tests are meant for. So we installed by hand Telnet on those systems, but we have a policy that does not allow to have Telnet installed and activated. Luckily, it is already disabled, the service. Again, we also see that this rule has a high severity, but the package is still available, so some admin could manually open or start the Telnet service socket. We can also see here a button to check which hosts are failing this rule. Let's just click on this button to see what this means. Okay, it's only one system that is affected of this incompliance. We also see something which we can use later. We have a filter set here in this filter bar. I just want to copy this because we might be using it later. Let's go back to this overview and have a look at the full report. So we now know roughly what has happened, but what is the details about this report? Let's have a look. I open this in a new tab because this will be something I will have to use later again. So I hope you all see the new tab as well. Okay, so this is a report. This is really something very, very verbose. You see a lot about details about the actual SCAP run. So when did it happen? Details about the system that was affected. And of course, we see again that the system did not satisfy the condition of, in this case, one rule, passed one failed. And then we see at the bottom of this page a list of these tests. First one is the passed one, the second one has not passed. We can click on this to see more details. For instance, you can see a longer description. So this is like more a generic thing. So this is not a vulnerability. This is more a generic thing that you don't want to have Telnet installed. This can come from several advisories. What we also see is what we can do to remedy this. So there's, in this case, we have 4 links to remediation scripts or snippets. So if I click here on the show next to the remediation shell script, I see a shell script, a rather simple shell script, what you would have to do in this case to deinstall the package Telnet. What I also can show is the same done with Ansible or with Puppet and Anaconda. Yeah, so I want to show you how this, in this case I choose the Ansible snippet, how this can be applied to my host. I go back to the first tab. So this, if I want to have a one-time run of a certain script, Ansible snippet to my host, this is a job, which I find under host job templates. And what I want to do is I want to run an Ansible playbook. So this is the job template I read for this task, and I click on run. Job category Ansible playbook. I want to run a playbook. I don't want to go to any bookmarks or any previously stored filter, but I have a search query because this is the search query used for the hosts failing this task button. I copied this, I will paste it here. And this would basically resolve to all the affected hosts. I see here currently resolves to 0 hosts. I have to refresh first and see that afterwards it resolves to 1 host, our CentOS 7 host, but of course it could be more hosts not being compliant to that rule. Okay, and then I can enter the playbook, which would be the code from here, but this is, if you are familiar with Ansible, this is not a complete playbook. I need to have some decorators around. I prepared this already, so I just copy it from another window. So this now would be the complete playbook. So I have to have a list starting or containing entries with a pointer to which hosts we want to apply this, and then the list of tasks. And here indented below this task entry, I see the code which was extracted from the full report here. So now I could, of course, say I want to execute it now, which I'm going to do, but I could also schedule this for future execution, or also say do this regularly, because somehow Telnet gets installed twice a week and I always want to have it deinstalled. So I submit it now, which leads me to a typical view you always see if you run some remote execution job. The overall result of my job and the host list onto which my jobs is running. I can click the name and then I see in something similar to real time the actual output of my Ansible run. And you see already here the task show Telnet service removed. sounds as if this would care for my problem. Okay, and that's it. We see the summary. So there was one change, no failures, access status is 0. Okay, should be compliant, our system. Let's go back to this host. The overview we started with, oh, it's still incompliant. Yes, this happens because the SCAP reports are sent regularly, but not immediately after every other thing. So I would have to check when it's actually run, but we can trigger it manually. There's a button here hidden under the scale remote job. If you go to the drop-down menu, you can see run OpenSCAP scan. So this triggers the run of the OpenSCAP scan and the sending of the report back to the orcharhino. Again, this is a job, so what we are seeing right now is the same as we did before with the playbook. And again, have a look at the standard output of this job. You can see the exact command line call, and we see that it uploaded the results to the orcharhino. Access status is again 0. And we now see indeed that our system is compliant. Okay, so that's my short introduction to doing compliance scans with orcharhino and OpenSCAP. I want to thank you for your attention, and I wish you a nice evening.